Extremely grateful. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Resilience Playbook. I think it's an appropriate place to start, Wani, with giving you the right introduction. And so once I do that, I've just got a question, and then from there, I mean, the floor is yours. Your story is absolutely powerful. Your TED Talk, everybody needs to go watch her TED Talk. Go find it. This is a topic for everybody. And not only is it rooted in resilience, but it's rooted in courage. There's a tremendous amount of grit and a lot of freedom in what you're about to hear from Wani. So here we go. All right. Wani Iris Manly. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Correct,
All
yes.
right. You're an attorney, TEDx speaker, best-selling author based in Paris, France, which we've got to hear the story about that here shortly. Your TEDx talk, Changing Changes Everything, explores reframing disruption as transformation. That's huge. She left a high-performing job. I said, you left a high-performing job, legal career in the U.S. to rebuild your life abroad. A move that defines her story of reinvention, identity, and courage under transition. Again, welcome to the show. So
Thank
where
you
I'd
for
like to start with you is just really take us back, really to that moment in time where, what I like to say, the threshold of control, meaning like, hey, the weight of pain of change is calling your name, because the weight of staying the same is crushing, right? So I would like for you to take us back to that time when you realized it was time to make a move. It was time to adapt, even if you didn't know exactly what that move really looked like.
Yeah, so for me, mine really came up on, I would say it really came, the universe is always speaking to us, or God is always speaking to us like in
Hmm.
whispers, you know? And then at certain times we just don't hear it, and then like the two by four hits us, right? And so for me, it was just like I woke up on that New Year's Eve on, in 2010, and I had plans to go and party with my friends in Miami like I always do. But at 6 o'clock that morning, I woke up. I just felt like I had no business going out there and partying and pretending like everything was okay when I had like a hell of a year. And what that year looked like was that I was just coming out of a crushing relationship. The new law firm that I just started like wasn't doing quite well because at the time I had just started my practice. I had just fallen in love for the very first time and not knowing anything about entrepreneurship, but just I never really gave myself any chance of success. And I really felt like crap about myself. I was behind on everything. So I was struggling financially, and I just felt like I needed to sit my butt down and to just analyze my life, which is what I did. I was on a spiritual path at that time, and I truly believed, and I saw that what was really creating my reality was what I was believing about myself, what I was feeling about myself. Call it karma, whatever. But it was just like I just felt like okay, I was creating everything around me, and so I needed to really sit and reflect. And so that's what I did. I showed up very organically of just looking at what went right, made a list of that. Then I made a second list of okay, what went wrong, and the second list was much longer than the first. And I took radical responsibility. I went through every single thing I've written on a piece of paper, and I said, okay, what was happening? And when I was done, I just realized, okay, I was, really my head wasn't into the business. I was also like a neophyte at that time in terms of like running a business, but I was just really like, in love. And I just wasn't making any money. I wasn't cutting it. I had came from like a big firm. And I had to do everything, whereas when you're in a law firm, you just have to bill the 2,100 hours. But in my practice, I was the business development manager. I was the bookkeeper. I was everything. I was having to go out there and get in business. And here I was coming from like a big firm of like big corporations. And here I am like, peddling, going to BMI or BNI like at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
It's like this ridiculous, like, networking events where it's just so like, I hate them. You know what I mean? And then I just kind of started looking, okay, what I believe of myself. I started writing out all of my limiting beliefs on a brown piece of paper, and I was just very honest with myself. There was a lot of like, I'm not good enough. It didn't matter whether I was driving a Porsche, I was living in a Miami condo. I just was looking, okay, what's between these two my two brain cells here, right? And then I just got on my hands and knees and I prayed the most reverent prayer, asking God to please let me let go of all these like, limit beliefs about myself. And then I was kind of done with it. And then I began to just look toward the future, just begin to plan and to write that everything I wanted to be, do, or have. And I just wrote that in the limits. And when midnight came, I took like one sip of champagne glass of the champagne, I passed out because I mean, it was 6 o'clock that morning. And I'll tell you something, I never said that I wanted to leave Miami, but I knew that I was desperate for a change. And 3 days later, like, Paris started popping up in terms of, like, there are these different signs, and that's really where it all began. But at that moment, I was just like, I was done. I was done feeling the way I was feeling. I was done with the struggle. I was done, just being sad, and just I wasn't depressed. I was just, like, just feeling trapped, in a life that just wasn't quite me.
Take me back to that moment though, that moment of realization. And you said that you had woke up at 6, you're just analyzing your life. Was there a specific process, or was it one of those, and you'd mentioned it was very organic? Because I find
Yeah.
that a lot of people who are walking down the path, which is not a 4-lane highway, as we all know, there's that intuition that hits them. They don't have the courage to fully explore it, and or they're really in the moment paralyzed on what's the next step,
Mhm.
because they think there has to be a strict process of self discovery. And I had a very similar moment myself about a decade ago, too, to where it brought me to the West Coast. And I'll tell anybody and everybody, adaptation, once you lean into it, creates growth. But I would love to hear from 6 a.m. to midnight, like exactly what went on from 6 a.m. to midnight.
First, that's just I had never done that before. I'm a huge meditator. When I wake up in the morning, first thing I do is I grab my journal, and it's actually, like, right there, and I just journal. I do the morning pages, and so I've been doing it for, like, about 20 years or so. And so, but it just kind of intuitively came down to me. I literally, okay, I always set intention for everything, and my intention was to, have clarity, to close out the new year, and to look for and to create something completely different. And it just came to, okay, write down what went right, what happened that was positive, and then I went to what was negative. And then it was just, like, kind of intuitive. Okay, the next one's, what do I believe about myself? Because, like I said, I knew that what was creating my life on the outside was what I was believing on the inside. And when I was done, like, I believe in God, a higher power, and I just started praying and just asking it to, or he, or whatever you want to call it, to help me let go of all these, like, limiting beliefs about myself. Because I knew no matter what, next year, or 2011 or 2026 was never going to be my year if I was still believing everything that I wrote on a piece of paper. And I'll tell you, it was the most reverent prayer I have ever prayed in my life. I was so serious about it. And I just took my time. I stayed in my apartment, or my loft, my condo at the time. And then I remember, every year I always buy on December 31st, I always get a brand new journal. And for me, it's like, it's a new chapter or a new book. And so I remember just getting a particular journal, and I always get one that speaks to me. And this one had the word imagine on it. And I swear to you, I just kept the reason why it took so long, because I was writing, like, at the second part of the day, when I was writing, like, what I wanted to be, do, and have. I was, like, in a zone. I always say to people, like, when I speak, I said, I feel like I was writing that day the way I feel like Elon Musk must think, like, on a daily basis. Because for me, there were no limits. I was not thinking, okay, how am I gonna do this? Like, where's the money gonna come from? It was just, okay, I wanna fly. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And then I was like, basically, I went through everything. I was setting intentions. I was visualizing myself in it. And then I was doing mantras with my mantra beads with Sanskrit. And so that's why it took me so long. I'm not very thorough. I mean, the attorney in me is, like, always an attorney in the sense of just being very meticulous and very thorough. And then when midnight came, like I said, I had literally been up since 6 o'clock that morning. And yeah, I was tired.
That is the quintessential story of like how rebirth or the process of rebirth begins. And a lot of people, I mean, if you've read the book from Angela Duckworth on grit, fail to realize that you can't have courage without fear, right? Like that's in some of the most courageous things that you can do, or when no one actually sees them, and going through the tears, the emotions. And our worlds are built on identity. So up to that point, and you had talked about working for a big law firm, then going on your own. A lot of folks are extremely scared of freedom. So as you're
Yeah.
exploring freedom at that time, Wani, a lot of people are going to pull back because of the financial aspect. Whether if there's a little cash flow, a lot of cash flow, like that pain of change really entraps them. But
Yeah.
up to that point though, what was truly your identity? What were when you looked in the mirror, what did you see?
Looking back at that time, I saw someone who was really attached to the identity of being a lawyer, of someone who had worked so hard to achieve what I had done. And I was looking for someone I just really wanted her freedom because one of the reasons why I left my law firm, the previous firm, is because I had none. I was making a lot of money or really good money, but I had no chance to really spend it. Like my beneficiaries were my parents, meaning like my father at the time, because I was working 7 days a week, which is why I just started my law firm. And so for me, I was just looking to achieve like I was looking to achieve what I had in my law firm, but a lot better. So I wanted like the same or better salary, but I wanted to do law that was on my own terms. Like for example, I was doing litigation work, which I absolutely hated, and I wanted to do transaction, do IP work. I wanted to have my weekends off. I wanted to be able to, not to be thinking about work all the
It was a
time. And
grind.
it was really a grind for me, and I just absolutely hated it. I would give it and say, okay, I do think like when you first come out of school and you start working for a firm or for your first job or so, you get there's some level of having to prove yourself. But
Mhm.
ours was just so over the top from the law perspective, and I was just I literally I'm telling you 14-hour days, Monday through Friday, and 7 to 8 hours on the weekends. My first year of working for the law firm, I never saw my parents. I never came home for Christmas, for New Year's. I mean, another thing, it was just like I hated it. I had no freedom, and
So
so
that's so another question, just to pause real quick on that as we're talking, but what did others see? Like, during that moment, what did they see versus what you felt? Like, what did they see versus what you felt?
they saw a very, very successful woman. I mean, I was driving a Porsche Boxster, everybody
Yeah.
knew me. I was always, I had like really nice clothes. People just saw me and I had quote unquote made it. I had achieved the American dream. At the firm I was working for, it was on Brickell Bay Drive. I had like a semi-corner office, like it was all marble building. It's the Aon building, if anybody knows what I'm talking about. And for my background is West African. My parents, I
Mhm.
was United States. My parents are West African, so I had achieved the American dream. I was a homeowner. I had lots of great friends and things like that. So I had arrived, I had made it. And so people saw and I was a lawyer, you know what I mean? So, and I was working for one of the top lawyers in South Florida. Whenever I would tell people who I work for, oh my God, you work for Mitchell First? I'm like, yes, I do. Oh, you must be a damn good lawyer. I'm like, yeah, I am, because everybody knew his reputation was so great, and I'm in the US for tax and litigation. And so it was just like, guy, there was I wouldn't say a facade, but it was just much more of like an image that I was actually holding together, if I'm being quite honest.
Well, and that's why I asked that, because in the corporate world in particular, well, just in general, like, we've been taught to wear masks, both men and women. I mean,
Mhm.
in particular, those that are in a profession like yours, like mine, the identity is rooted in the grind in a lot of ways. And what people see versus what you feel, they don't ever get to see what you feel, I guess, is where I'm going with that. And so when
Yeah.
you made the decision to say, you know what, I'm burning the boats per se, I'm charting a new course for myself, there had to be some cost though along the way. Like, in going back, where you are now, if you put yourself back in your shoes back then, which is what we're doing, what did it cost you though? What was the cost of change outside of that full day of, really reconciling with yourself?
Wow, the biggest change was actually, finances.
Yeah.
I came from like, and I was making. I mean, I was at the time, so it was an international law firm, and I was working in the Miami office, but the checks were being cut out of Chicago. And so, people, your listeners, I mean, Miami has one of the lowest salaries there is. I don't care who's
Mm.
moving there now. Zuckerberg and everybody else can be moving there, but in terms of like the rest of the country, there's because I know prior to 2020, before it became like a crypto hub and all of that, it was just like it's always been built in tourism. And so and for a year, I was actually looking to go other places. I wanted to do work in house counsel, and I kept hearing, "You're too expensive. You're too expensive," because of the fact I was in Miami getting paid Chicago salary, and so after a year of hearing, "Wani, you're too," and I just couldn't afford it. I mean, literally. I had just bought a, a $300,000 condo. I had bought my dream car of a Porsche Boxster, and I had a mortgage to pay. And so for me, I could not afford to make a dollar less when I was actually making. And so for me, it cost me the financial stability because, like I said before, I mean, I we had a full service. I had a paralegal, I had a secretary, there was an accountant did all the taxes. I mean, we had catered lunches, there was nothing, the parking was paid for. I never had to go out there and actually get my own business, so everything was just, okay, here's your file, this is what you're working on. And so I had to learn all of those things. But I'll tell you what, though, I'm so grateful that I had to go through all that because it's what made me be in business for 18 years now, because I had to learn how to do all that. And so yeah, so financially, I mean, I was behind, and I got behind on my mortgage. I was behind. It was a struggle. It was really, really a big struggle. And so, like I said, because at the time I didn't know how to run a business. All I knew was how to be a lawyer. No one taught me. So I had to learn.
That is a powerful response to the question that I asked. And well, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the show. And people are really scared of freedom. There's four freedoms that we all look for: freedom of time, freedom of purpose, freedom of worry, and freedom of money. And that last one, because cash is oxygen in so many ways, whether you're single, you got a family, whether you're, the sole provider, or you've got help, it doesn't matter. Like, for a lot of folks, the time money aspect, they don't think about time, they think about money. And when I'm going with that is that they print more money, but they don't print more time.
Yeah.
And we get in these places, including myself, to where we're honestly running enthusiastically in the wrong directions a lot of times. But because of the money component, which is real, you talked about your mortgage, you talked about just lifestyle, the whole nine yards. We feel like we have to stay because that's all we know. And that's where our identity is driven. And to that point, I want to ask you this. There is a hidden cost to high achievement. There's a hidden cost. Anybody that is in a high achieving role, in your opinion, what is the hidden cost?
100%. So I would say for women and men, it's a little
And
bit
that's what
different.
I'm curious about from your vantage point, from a woman's perspective, right? Like, where you come from, where your family's from, etc. What is the hidden cost from in your world?
For me, it was a cost of relationships. It was a cost of marriage. It's a cost of not having children. It's the cost of just being married to your work, to defining yourself and creating an entire identity and self-worth system based on all of that. For me, at one point, it was costing me my health. I mean, there was one point in time I was like, I find myself, I was having chest pains. This was right before 2001, I believe, or in 2001. And I found myself for an entire year going from doctor to doctor trying to diagnose chest pains. And I'll never forget, I went to see a doctor in North Miami Beach, and he was an older doctor. And he was like, okay, young lady, he was like, okay, how old are you? I was like, yeah, I'm 30 something, whatever, or 20 something. He goes, can you, do you have a house? And I was like, "Yeah, I have a mortgage, And he goes, well, do you have kids? And I was like, no. He said, do you have a husband? I'm like, no. He goes, do you own this? I'm like, I just kept saying no. He was like, well, what do you do? And I said, I'm a lawyer. And he says, for which firm? I gave the name of the firm. And he said, how much are you working? He said, and I told him, he's like, okay. He said, you know what? You need to quit. Otherwise, you're gonna have a heart attack. And I was like, what? He goes, listen, I don't know how old he was, but he was like, I have a wife, I've got 5 kids, I've got, 20 something grandkids, I've got a yacht, I've got timeshare, I've got this. And he's like, I sleep at night. No problem. He goes, I run this practice because I sleep at night. And he was like, I'm like, at least, I don't know, he's like 30 years older than me. He was like, and he goes, here
Such
you are.
wisdom.
Yeah, he was just telling me, he's saying, "You're not," he was like, I wasn't asking for sleeping pills. I was just saying to him, like, why he's like, I don't have any chest pains. And so it was from him where I began to say, okay, something's going on here. And then, like, the next doctor that I actually went to, who was a holistic doctor from California, he just began to, he's like, let's just do a mammogram, see what's going on there. And he's like, I know you're too young for one, but let me just check it out. And they found actually like a lump in my right breast.
Mm.
And, they did the whole biopsy. I was completely scared because I had never had any kind of I never get the cold, I never get a headache or anything. In fact, the first time I actually tried to have the biopsy, I woke up and the doctor came in, and I just screamed. I was like, "I can't go through with it." And the next time, a friend came with me. He came from Chicago, and, like, they knocked me out. And so they did the biopsy, and everything was okay, it was benign. And the doctor said to me, "You know what? You're pretty stressed out." And so he was like, "You're also heartbroken as well too." And so he was like, and he was just I'm like, "Okay, when you have any kind of ailments in the breast area, for a woman, you're holding on to grief, you're holding on to sadness." He's like, "What's happened to your life?" And I said, "Okay, about this relationship." I said, "I've got this like high powered pressure cooker of a job where I feel like I'm in a pressure cooker all the time. Like, I mean, it's just so much that I gotta perform, you know, it's like I can't make a mistake type thing, you know, because I work for one of the best stores in South Florida and this and that." And so he was like, "Start
You have to
meditating."
always be on. It's the feeling of
Exactly.
always being on, and even when you have unstructured time, it's structured time.
Exactly. And that's when the spiritual path came into my life. I had a friend of mine, he was a Russian Jew. He introduced me to Kabbalah, and I went to
Hmm.
my first spirituality was I took a Kabbalah class in North Miami Beach for 4 weeks. And to this day, I can't tell you what it was about, but I understand Tikkun. And that was all that I got of it. Then my spiritual teacher from the UK, from London, came into my life, and I got on a spiritual path, and my life just completely transformed. And, I'm here talking to you honestly, but that was like what led me on.
Well, it's funny that you say in regards to the health component, right? Like it's not, I mean, it's health is wealth. And when I say that it's funny, it's meaning like I was having this conversation this morning. Health is wealth. We typically trade our health for wealth early on, then we're trading our wealth for health later on. I mean, that's an old saying that goes back forever. But what people don't realize or fail to realize is how physical this world really is. Your body will tell you when your central nervous system is crashing.
Yeah.
A lot of times we ignore it because we always have to be on, especially the high performers, high achievers. And at some point the body will collect. It just will. And I found that out this past February because my mother had passed in November. My dad was in the ICU all of January. And it was just straight combat for 6 months on top of, running a business, running a family, all the responsibilities where my identity is rooted, the
Yeah.
people that need me. And sometimes the most courageous thing that you can honestly do is rest, recover, recalibrate, have some unstructured time. But for folks like, us or where you came from in the industries that we serve, it's like, hey, it's like a badge of honor to be able to work your ass off
Yeah.
and say that you work your ass off, but we fail to realize we grow most in recovery, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally. And to that point, which I want to ask you this question around pressure, is because you talked about the pressure cooker. Like
Mhm.
we don't rise really to the level of the occasion. We fall to our conditioning.
Yeah.
And when I mean conditioning, you can take it so many different ways. You can never let your fitness outpace your durability. But what I see when I'm, in the worlds that I work in, the people that I mentor, coach, both men and women, is those that who are in that high performing roles, high stake roles, etc. Their conditioning in so many ways is pulling them back
Mm.
until they make that decision like you had to make and saying, you know what, I'm going to pursue something different, even if it costs me
Yeah.
financially, even if it costs me relationships. I want to ask you about your conditioning. You know, up to that point, why did you operate the way you operated within your life?
I didn't think I had a choice.
Okay.
I didn't I'll tell you something, when I bought my condo, my boss, Mitchell, it was so fun when I came back and from the closing, he said to me, "Oh, you bought a place?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Now I own you. You can never
Yeah.
quit.
You got debt.
You got
Yep.
that." He
They
said to
love
me.
debt. The more debt, the more hungry you become. I heard the
It
same thing when I first started my career. Oh, you bought a house? Fantastic. Now you got to go pay for it.
Yeah, and so that was real the real pressure that I felt, and I'll tell you that at that point, my resilience mantra that didn't become really clear to me, which was my conditioning, but I can put into words now, was that it's not working is not an option.
Yeah.
I have always operated that way, and so, it became even more clear when I went into private practice or when I went to Paris, and it's just for me, there is no rich parents to fall back on. There is
Same
no
here.
you know, you just
I
gotta do
wasn't
it.
born in a silver spoon environment. I was born from a very humble beginning, and it's
Yeah.
kind of that's where my conditioning comes from, right? Like my parents can make the eagle scream off of a quarter, and I was conditioned to my dad. He grew up in Western Oklahoma, raised his brothers. Uh, my grandmother raised them. His father wasn't around much, so that's why I asked that conditioning question because it drives me a lot to change the family tree in so many ways. But I ran into my own fork in the road about 8, 9 years ago where I had, like I told you earlier at the beginning of the show, do the same thing you did. I had to go find another environment.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did.
And, for me also, the other part of my conditioning is just that my culture, African culture,
Yeah.
which is very different from Black American culture. And my also too, my father was former Minister of Finance for Liberia. So my
Oh,
last name
wow.
has a lot of weight to it. Everybody
Yeah.
knows my father. And so there's always that, that I was operating. For me, excellence has always been the standard. It is for any, child of an African, parent, because it's like in our culture, school is just an achievement and success is just and you just have to do it, especially because it's very different. The African elites per se, or the people who work for the government that can afford to send our kids to school, you don't come home and say, "Hey, I just want to explore my life. I just want to take a sabbatical, or I just want to be a writer." Like,
No,
no, you
you've got
either
to go earn a
get a
degree.
doctor or
Yeah.
a lawyer. So my mom is a nurse, and so for me, I never liked the hospital. For me, it was just always law was like the natural path, and then I was always in Liberia with my father. I was, always around like in the heads of state and like ministers of of different countries, things like that. So for me, I was raised in an environment to where it was just for me excellence was from day one. Then as like also to like from a lawyer perspective, when you want to be a lawyer in the US, you can never screw up. Like you just can't get into a good law school with with crappy grades. And then once you're in law school, like you have to like do well, there's only one exam. So it's like there was no partying and messing up. Like I've just never had that opportunity, other than it's not work is not an option. Like you just can't fail. Like there's never a plan B. And it's like this is getting done and the standard is excellence, period. So those are all my conditions I've been having
Well,
to.
uh, that's another powerful statement because we had an episode that we recorded with her name's Nellie Bill. She came from Malaysia. Same type of
Mm,
situation. It's the cultural aspect of like, hey, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be an engineer. If you
yeah,
don't, anything less is not acceptable, right?
exactly.
And that's it. But I think that also happens a ton in certain environments within America too. Of like these are the expectations, and of course, as we know, if an expectation is set unrealistically for a child and he or she falls short, there's hidden disappointment. And then it creates this cycle that unfolds. And I'm just speaking just from what I've seen and just the circles that I've been involved in. It unfolds, it unfolds throughout their life. And then they start parenting out of fear, etc. Um,
Mhm.
but take me back now to where you made that transition because uncertainty, what people don't realize about uncertainty is it's the very condition that impels a person to really unfold his or her powers. So
Yeah.
when you made that decision to say, you know what, I'm moving to Paris, like moving to Paris, don't speak the language, or maybe spoke a little bit of it, I don't know.
0.
Yeah, well, take us back there. Like where was your mind? Like where was your heart set? Like where was your emotional state? Because that's a leap. That I mean, that is a leap for someone to even move 45 minutes for a lot of folks is a leap. But to go to Paris, that's
Yeah.
literally putting yourself in a new environment that is force functioning you to be your future self.
Yeah, it's so funny because now it's hard to believe that I actually did all that. So
It's
what
to me, it's
crazy.
incredible and insane. It's just like, I'm thinking I'm going to Greece in September, and you know, I've always said I want to be put in an environment where I don't speak their language. I speak one language, English, but it's Greece, for goodness sakes. It's not like I'm going to a place to where they don't speak English, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so like when I watched your TED talk and heard you talk about that and how you were learning French, you found a place. I mean, that is incredible to me. Incredible to me. So I'll shut up. Explain, please.
Thank you. So from that day, from December 31st, what ended up happening was like 3 days later, my entire life in Miami began to video all of these signs about Paris, 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 French this and French that. And it was crazy because, like I said, my family's from Liberia. It's not a francophone country. So, and I had no
Mm,
connection to France whatsoever. I wasn't a typical American. It's all like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, all like, this is made in France on it. So it made no sense as to why all of a sudden, like my entire life in Miami, which is like North Cuba and North Latin America, it's just all of a sudden getting all these signs about Paris. And so for a year, I just kept getting all these signs. So initially, I went to Paris for my birthday to investigate, see what they're all about. And I went in March and I was there for 4 days and I got like really sick because I was dressed, it was very cold, like in Chicago, but I was dressed like Miami weather, which is like summertime all the time because I didn't have the proper clothing. And so I was sick when I was there. And then from there, I went to the French Riviera and I went to visit a friend of mine from Denmark. He was in the yacht business, and him and his wife invited me to stay at their place. And so I basically went to every single city along the Riviera except Saint Tropez. And then when I went to Monaco, I had this like really strange occurrence where had extreme kinds of deja vu where everything and everyone looked very familiar to me. And my whole routine when I was in France at the time was I would get up in the morning, I would go to a cafe, get a quiche and get a glass of champagne, take my journal and just start writing. And I would get like do like the hop on, hop off bus and just walk with no agenda. And I remember I was like doing this in Monaco and I just heard go this way. And I just turned a direction and I came across a mosaic water fountain in Monaco, like in Monte Carlo, that had I'm a Pisces. I'm birthday's February 27th in astrology, and it was a symbol of the symbol of Pisces. And my heart just said to me, and I heard from my heart that said, "Your life is in transition from a lawyer to a writer." And I was like, "What?" Like, big deal, because and it made sense because at that time when I got on a spiritual path, like my creative side began to start to open. I started blogging, and people really kind of like, I was really taking notice. But I was like, wait a minute, I came all the way out here, spent all this money to come to Europe just to hear your life is in transition from a lawyer to a writer because I was blogging. So I was kind of pissed a little bit. So I went back to Miami and I was like, okay, so I got the sign, so much for that. And I thought it would be over with. And it actually wasn't. I'm telling you, like it just quadrupled like every single day. It just got intensified. And I remember it was like in August, it was like a beautiful day in Miami where there's just a single cloud in the sky. And it's a day where everyone in Miami is either at the beach, on a yacht, on a boat, like outside. But instead
hmm
I was in Wharton Building and Brickell Drive. And I was like just working. I was looking at this contrast and I was just like, hating life at the time. And I remember looking outside the window and I saw butterflies flying. It wasn't like a super tall building, but it was high enough for me to say to myself or to question why was I seeing butterflies fly quite that high? And the minute I said that, I noticed it and I just heard move. And I looked at my chest and I just heard my heart speak to me and said, move to Paris. And I swear I thought of it for like 20 seconds. I said, you know what? Why not? And it was like when I said that energetically, because I was in the office by myself, but I spoke it to the universe and I felt like I had just parted the Red Sea. And at the time, like I was trying to sell my place. It was in the middle of the crisis, the housing crisis, but I found a buyer and literally I sold the car, I sold my condo, and then I just basically gave myself to different charities. Some of my friends got my things, and I just kept what I needed to keep, which was like my legal files. I kept that at a friend's garage, and I just kept my spiritual books. And I just kept the best of the best and I gave away everything else. And I just say to people, that day, it wasn't my ego that brought me there. It was something that was calling me there. I didn't go to Paris. Paris called
And
me
you still
to.
live in Paris, right?
I do,
Yeah,
but I do come back and forth all the time because I do spend the winters here. My parents are here; they're getting older, so I come here
sure.
for
I get that.
you know December, January, February, and then because of speaking, I never come to the US just to speak and just go back. I always like make like a time here, then I go back.
Can I ask
Um,
you a quick question? Like,
of
what
course.
has Paris taught you that America never did?
Oh my gosh. It has taught me so many things, but I would say the greatest thing is what an absolute privilege it is to be an American. I am so freaking
Hmm,
grateful that my parents made sure that I was actually born here because they were born in Africa. Because the things that we take so much for granted as an American, like the American psyche of positivity, of just having this like can-do attitude about anything, no matter what, and like everything is possible because in France everything is impossible. Um,
really?
see,
I've
yeah,
never
yeah.
been to Paris.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness,
I've
you
never been to Paris. Now I've been to Europe, but I've just never have been to Paris.
oh,
So,
you have to
but the
go.
psyche there's like there's more cynicism, or is it's like everything's just I don't know. I mean, just harder to them.
Everything is much harder. Everything is much more complicated.
Gotcha,
Very much like an individualistic way conditioning here, whereas everything there is much more collective. Everything
gotcha,
is this country, but it's just like, for example, like you really, when people ask for something, you'll never hear the word no, which is no. You'll hear c'est pas possible. I mean, it's not possible. So I always tell people like from negotiation standpoint in business, the negotiation started at it's not possible. It's like, and they just want to like they want to like put you there, and it's a weird thing that they do, where it's just like everyone's kind of in this like place of their specific
I
class
gotcha.
system, you know.
Now, are
And
you
so
fluent in French?
I'm at 60% now. I've drastically
That's still
improved
incredible.
from my TED talk, and I'll tell you why. So the government has passed a law to where now if you for certain visa type holders, you do have to have a certain language proficiency if you want to like
Which
have
makes sense.
which I'm so glad because now there
Yeah,
is a excuse, you know what I mean? And because it's
absolutely.
quite possible to live in Paris and never learn to speak French because everyone there
Engl
speaks
yeah.
English now.
Well,
Everyone,
I mean, that's what like, I'd be walking around with my phone like Duolingo, and last time I was in Switzerland, that's what I was doing, and I was in the port of Switzerland that they speak French, and they just looked at me, and they're like, "I speak English." Like, and I was just like, "I just feel like such an idiot because us Americans speak one language predominantly, right?" But 60% fluency is still pretty dang impressive to me. How long have you lived there now?
gosh, I first got there in 2012 was
Okay.
when I wasn't living there consistent. So like when I first got there, because when I first went, I never thought I was going to be living there. I was just following signs. That was my mindset, right? And so initially I was there for 3 months, and then I came back because at the time, even though I do transaction IP work, I did have one case that was in court. And so I was like, it was a divorce case from California where they had like a property in Florida, they were trying to divide, they were, as part of the divorce settlement. And so, like, the California council actually hired me to handle it. And I had to go to court and divest of all that. And so that took 3 months. And then I went back to Miami. I went back to Paris with only $500 at that time. But and so I
Hmm,
was there for 3 months, and I just kept going back because as an American citizen, we can go to the Schengen region in Europe without any kind of tourist visa for 3 months.
gotcha.
But then
Yeah,
you have to
going
come
back to the
back.
$500 question real quick. How are you cash flowing things though? I mean, we're going to go back to the money question. Like, how are you cash flowing everything?
So at the time I was doing securities work, I was doing a lot of most of my clients at the time were publicly traded companies.
Okay.
And so I had five main clients I was actually working with. And quite frankly, they were dream clients. Dream clients so much
Those are
just
nice.
those are so. Let me tell you how
Yeah.
good they
They're
were. One in
unicorns.
particular, yes, this is unicorn I had like it was a telecom company to where like the CEO would like literally they would put the money in my operating account, they would wire it to me and I would have no idea. I would get an email from the CEO saying, "Hey Wani, we need X, Y, and Z. John's already put the money in account. If it's not enough, just tell him what you need." Like it was like that. There was no questions asked
Jeez.
whatsoever, right? And so the second time I went on my in my bank, I had like less than $500 like in my bank account, but I had accounts receivable coming in. And I'll never forget because I flew from Houston, and my mom is just, 'cause my parents were just like, "What the hell are you doing?" Because then nobody could really understand what I was doing. They were so fearful for me. And my mom was always asking, "Okay, you got money, you got this." My mom's a mom, you know what I mean? And then she
Mhm.
goes, "How much money you got?" And I said, about, I don't know, like 400 something. She was like, "What?" She almost like passed out at IAH at the airport. And I said, "Don't worry." I said, "I've got accounts receivable coming in." And I'm telling you, when I got on that plane, everything began to fall apart. The living arrangements that I actually had set up where my things were being held with this, I had met like a French lawyer. He was like my counterpart. He was a French securities lawyer. And we had talked about kind of like setting up something together because he needed like someone like with like on American side. And when I got there, he was like, "You can't stay with me. You have to leave in 2 days." And I was like scrambling. And I'll never forget that like my first client was like, because I was looking for an apartment there and looking for an apartment is like get an MBA in France, right? It's not like here where you throw a rock, you found a
Oh,
place.
wow.
Like they want to see a LinkedIn. So for me, I had a LinkedIn profile, but I wasn't looking for a job. It was just I have one, right? And so I began to put on there, I was writing books, and like the CEO of the telecom company was one of my connections, you know? And he lived in Paris before. And he goes, "Yeah, Wani, because I saw you're publishing this, you're publishing that, you're writing." And he's like, "We think we prefer to have a securities counsel who's just practicing law." And I lost him. That was the bread and butter, the unicorn client, right? That was the first to go. Then another one they split up. Then another one, the Ebola crisis came out, and they had actually published like a press release without like running it by me, and the SEC picked up on it. And they just thought they were like a fraudulent company, and they were like three companies together. And so like I lost all those people within like a span of like about a month. And I was calling my mom and my dad, asking them for money. And my mom was like, "Come back home. Like, who told you to go there?" Right. And I'll never forget my half brother David said to me, he was like, "Listen, sis," he was like, "this sort of fantasy you're trying to live out there, you need to come back home." They were trying to stage like an intervention, you know? And I tell you, I could not tell them because I was on a spiritual path. I was being pulled by something much greater to me, even though I didn't know what it was looking. And I'll tell you, like for about a couple of years, the most triggering question you could have asked me was, "Wani, what are you doing in Paris?" Because I had no idea. I didn't have a freaking clue. All I knew was I got the signs, I got the directive. It was so clear to me this is where I was supposed to be going. And I just trusted in this thing that I couldn't see that, okay, whatever was bringing me here was going to reveal itself to me in time. You talk about having faith the size of like, not a mustard seed, but like everything within me. And just like,
Well, and that was one of my questions. I mean, because it's one thing to have faith when everything's hitting on all cylinders. It's another thing when it's tested. I mean, yeah. And tested not just by your external environment, but also, those that are closest to you as well. And, they have your best interest at heart.
yeah.
Your family does. I've been through those conversations as well when they kind of look at you and you're like, what in the doing, Cole? Like, why are you doing this? And in those questions really are the answers. And it takes time and it takes a lot of self exploration. A lot of
Yeah.
folks aren't going to fully understand it, nor are they going to be able to wrap their arms around it. And that's okay. It's your life, right? At the end of the day, what matters most is who's staring back in the mirror. And you're able to
100%.
pass the mirror test. So the TEDx talk,
Hmm.
the topic of your TEDx talk, like walk me through that real quick. Like, because it's a fantastic TEDx talk. Go find it on YouTube. Everybody go follow it. I've watched it several times. I love it. But like, how did you get to the TEDx? And then how did you decide what the subject was going to be? What the topic was going to be? Because there's a science behind TED Talks.
Yeah, that was so interesting. So when I got to Paris, what ended up happening was I started writing books. I became like completely like confused with inspiration. I never said I wanted to be a writer, but I wrote my first book in 30 days. And so my story got picked
Wow.
up by it was a magazine called Expedition Magazine. It was like a British editor. And he had said, he had written, I was part of like, there's a big Facebook of like 40,000 expats. And he said, the post said, "Hey, I'm looking for like unusual stories of how people move to Paris." And he was like, "I don't want to hear about the typical, my husband moved here, I'm following that." And I said, "Okay, hey," I said, "This is me. I'm from Miami. And I just had a big blog written about me in New York." And so I sent him the article. He was like, "Can you condense this like 600 words and give it to me in 24 hours?" And I was like, "Sure." And so I did that. And because I want to publish in this edition. And so that story got published, and that put me on the map in terms of like, okay, my speaking career started being born because people started asking me, recognize me in Paris, like, "Oh my God, you're the girl with the shaved hair from Miami. Can you come and speak at my event?" So I started speaking, just kind of like, talking about my life. And so what ended up happening was I was going through a lot of struggle in Paris, and I could not tell my friends, or I couldn't complain about it to my friends in Miami. Because in their minds, I was in Paris,
I
they
was
were
about
obsessed
to say,
with
they're
Paris.
like, listen, you're supposed to be finding the man of your dreams. You know, you go to Paris to fall in
Yes.
love. Like, we
And it
don't feel
was
sorry for you.
Yeah, and it was so frustrating to me because I was really struggling, and I would never
Yeah.
forget. And I did a Facebook Live, and it was called "Everybody Only Sees the BMW," but in my case, it was like it was driving a Porsche, right? It was really about everyone seeing like the iceberg of
Oh, yeah.
success
Yeah, yeah. You don't see
diagram,
what's beneath.
right? And so basically, I think I did it on my personal page, and I did it was I was walking along the river in Paris, and when I was done a voice spoke to me and said, "Do it in Lindsay's group." Lindsay was like she was like a coach. It was like her group was called like Heal Yourself Rich or something like that. And I just heard do the live in this group. And I was like, what? I heard the voice again. I said, okay, whatever. I didn't want to do it again because I don't like video. I like speaking on stage. I don't like the virtual events. And I did the same live again, and it wasn't with the same fervor. It wasn't like the same energy, but I did it. And I'm telling you, nobody watched. But someone watched on a replay, and it was an Indian woman, and she DM'd me. She's like, "My God, Wani, I heard your story," and she was like, "What a phenomenal story!" And she says, "May I please introduce you to someone?" Um, it's just part of this like high-end mastermind that I'm actually doing, and they're doing a TED Talk event at a castle in Northern Ireland. And they're looking for
So
speakers, and
that's
she's like,
where that's where it was?
"No, this is how the
Okay,
TED
this is
Talk."
how it started? Gotcha.
Yeah, that's how it started. And she was like, quite frankly, everyone there is white. They need some sass. They need personality. She was really like blood. She was like, they
I
need
love it. I love it. Absolutely.
so she introduced me to Shelley. She was from Iowa. And she was putting the event together with her friend and Karen. Karen's from Irish but living in Australia. And so I was one of the speakers to go and attend this, high-powered mastermind speak at this event. And so Karen has a sister named Emma, and Emma was at the event. And I talked to Emma maybe for like 2 seconds at the whole event, right? Speaking there. And I ended up having to leave the event. It's this beautiful castle in Northern Ireland and in Skillen. And I went back to Paris actually because I was like moving apartments. And I'll never forget, like a couple of months later, I connected with Emma and I connected right away. And Emma she was into mental health, and she was, speaking as well too. And so during the pandemic and COVID, which I was in Paris, Emma reached out to me. She's like, "Hey," she goes, "You want to do like a TEDx talk?" She's like, "Yeah, TEDx is doing this thing called TEDx Studios where you can do it. It's like the pandemic version of it." And I was like, she
Mhm.
was like, "I don't know." She's like, "Well, I can introduce you to like the license holder." I was like, "Yeah, let me have a conversation with him." He was like in London, Barrington, Gary. I had a conversation with him. He's like, "Yeah, we're looking for people to do it." And I was like, "You know what? I'd rather do the real thing. I'll pass. I appreciate that. I'll pass." And then I never thought about it again. I just months later, I get a DM from Emma. Emma says, the DM says, "So what are you doing on June 22nd, this year?" And I'm like, "I'm free." And she goes, "I'm doing a TEDx." She goes, I'm producing a TED event in Ireland." She goes, "And you were my first speaker that came up to me, and the theme is called Be the Change." And I was like, "What?" I go, "A live TED talk?" She goes, "Yeah." She goes,
What
"You're the
an
first."
incredible opportunity.
That's how I got the TED talk.
That's
I get chills,
fantastic.
chills.
That TED Talk started back in Miami when you made the decision.
100%.
People don't realize that.
100%. Yeah.
People don't take that stuff into consideration. That TED Talk had already happened. Time had just yet to pass. I love
Yeah.
that story.
And you wanna hear
Absolutely
something
love that
crazy?
story. Absolutely love that story. Well, look, as we come to a close with the episode, I do have a question. Another
Mhm.
one. I'm full of questions, but like just listening to your story, which I find fascinating, especially when you make the decision to leave Miami to go to Paris. The show's called the Resilience Playbook for a reason.
Mhm.
And the reason why I chose resilience as the attribute is because it's not if life happens, it's when it happens. And resilience is about getting back to baseline, being able to endure, being persistently consistent, all those things matter. Uh, but that's how I define resilience. Like through your walkabout, through your journey, how do you define resilience? And then another question to that is, if there's one play you could give someone to put in their resilience playbook, what would that play be?
I would say resilience is walking by faith. It is walking with the sense of knowing when it all doesn't when it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I would say it is still my mantra of it's not working is not an option. It is trusting yourself implicitly, and knowing that it's messy, that it is in the end, it's all going to work out. That what has happened to you is that you're not being punished, you're being purified. You're going through a purification
Mm,
process. And you're going through it because
mm.
the journey isn't for you, it's for other people. You're here to impact people. You don't go through all that crap for nothing. So stick with it. The solution is always in the problem in itself. There's always a solution to everything. Trust yourself through it. I would say my inner mantra of it's not working is not an option has been transformed to rest is productive and highly profitable.
There was so much wisdom in that answer. Holy cow. What did you say? You're not getting punished, you're being purified?
Vibe. It's not punitive, it's purification.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And then what'd you say about rest? Because I've gotta use this, by the way. You know, it's like you go to your therapist and you tell this joke and they look like they're writing down notes, but in fact they're stealing your joke. So like what did you say about rest?
Rest is productive and highly profitable.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Absolutely.
This is all the
Absolutely.
C-suite executives, the high power, the people who feel like the regulated professions, the stockholders, yeah, rest is productive and highly profitable.
Well, this has been a blessing having you on the show. I love your smile, love your energy, of course, love your story. I cannot thank you enough. Where can everybody find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can also find me on Instagram as well too. I'm the lovely Wani on
The
Instagram.
lovely Wani. Okay.
And then it's a nickname my friends gave in Miami. It's always stuck. And then on LinkedIn, I am Wani Iris Manly Esquire. So there's a you'll see my TEDx picture, so you'll recognize it's me. I'm probably the only Wani on LinkedIn actually. So
Beautiful name. There's one
African
Wani.
name, so
I
it's very
love it.
random name. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
you've been
you.
an absolute just joy to be with this morning. Grateful that you reached out. Grateful you were willing to come on the show. And even more grateful that you had the courage in the moment to say, you know what? It's time to change.
Yeah.
So thank you, Wani.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much to your listeners. And it's been a blessing as well on my end. Great
Uh,
to meet you, connect with you,
Perfect. Thank you.
share this moment. Thank you.
All right. That's a wrap. Thank you,
Uh,
Wani.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully you had some fun.
I did. I did. This was, I've been really looking forward to it. And I have zero expectations. I've learned to drop my expectation and just let the universe, God, just to,
Yeah,
over.
I would say I've learned that the hard way too. I think that one thing we didn't talk about that's ever present in a lot of folks is control, and it actually is an insecurity. Uh, in the minute you set an incorrect expectation, there's always hidden resentment on the other side. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if like we're spending 30 minutes to an hour together and you feel like just great energy, great story, uh, and it hits one person in the heart, job done. Like you leave the room better than you found it. But your story is amazing. Like
Thank you.
so good.
I wanted to say to you, we didn't get a chance to say, but because I did lockdown in Paris, right? And it made no sense
Oh,
because
yeah.
we're like, Florida, and which is like the only free place, at the
Yeah.
time of the planet, right? And I remember just being so angry about, like what was going on in the world at the time. And and I remember just like praying to God, like, how are we gonna like how is humanity gonna fight all this evil type thing, right? Because I didn't believe in the narrative, I didn't believe in the shot and all those different things. And I just kept seeing
Yeah, I
epic
didn't either.
funding.
I was
I didn't take
pushing
it.
back against everything. I
See,
w
I
I was I was one of those, I will say this, and I've talked about this in another episode with Dr. Amy Beard, that I was somewhat blackballed from my family. in a lot of ways. And it wasn't as if I was being, I don't know about you, but it's not like I was being defiant towards them. I was one of those like, you might want to do some research before you start poking something in your body. Like that's just me. And I'm a holistic guy. Like if it works, it works. My mother was battling cancer at that time. So I was somewhat being shamed into to going through it. And I just told him no. And
Yeah.
for a little while, this was just like whether it was me internalizing it or it was them truly putting it upon me. I mean, I never wore a mask anywhere. Um, and again, I didn't put them in a bad spot, but it was a very weird and bizarre time, is all I can say.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what was it like in Paris? Did they just freaking lock everything down?
It was a real lockdown. It was like I remember because I lived at my old apartment in
Yeah, that'd have been
Paris
tough.
at Notre Dame, and so it was actually like, for example, you could only go out like a certain radius, like 10 kilometers from your place. You could only be
The
outside
old
like for like
bubble.
an hour to like
Yeah.
walk your dog, to go to the supermarket, to go to the pharmacy. If you were like working from like, at your job, because everybody was working from home, you had to have like a note from note from your employer. And so for me, I was just like, oh, because I was okay. I see all this evil being done on the planet, and I remember just
Yeah.
praying, and Lord,
It was by
uh,
design.
for
It was
sure,
by design.
100%. Even like now with the whole what we're doing with the AI and everything like that. And I
Mhm.
remember like when I would pray about it, I would get this images of Gandhi. And I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" I was like, "You want us to meditate our way out of this crap, like this evil?" And I'll tell you something. I had no idea what I was being shown. You saw my TED talk. You saw at the
Uh-huh.
very end. I used Gandhi
Yep. Thought it
when
was
I
super
was.
powerful. I did not realize that he did not state that the original quote that he's, um, been
Yeah.
his name's been attached to. You said something different, like, "Here's his quote," like, y'all think that's his quote, but no, this is what he really said.
Like what he said. Well,
Yeah.
let me those images that I actually used when I was actually praying to God about the whole COVID thing, and that was the image I was actually getting. What I didn't realize was I was being shown my TEDx talk,
Yeah.
that prayer
Everything's
about
preparing
getting the
preparing you,
evil.
yeah.
And I also wanted to share too. I think I always like to share with your listeners that decision I made on New Year's Eve. I didn't party for the next 7 years. Is what I did every New Year's Eve. I stopped partying, and every day I would do that. It's called my New Year's Eve ritual that forever changed my life and took me to live into Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. We're very similar in that regard. Very much in deep self exploration, the greatest exploration one can make. And then, yeah, the COVID thing, I didn't think that really get into that or ask you because that had to be challenging in and of itself. Um, it was here just a bizarre time, and how people acted was very bizarre too. Like I just kind of take a couple steps back. I'm like, what in the world were we doing? Right. And it
Yeah.
just, you had all these external forces. You can call it whatever you want to call it. And I'm a man of faith, but I'm just like taking a couple steps back. And I just kind of like to deal in common sense. Like, it's just like something's not right. Something's not adding up. The colors on the Rubik's Cubes aren't matching right now. They're telling me that this color's green, but I'm seeing like spots of red. And, but yeah, again, I also eh, got to see who people were when adversity hit too. Like that was the other thing. But Wani, it's been a pleasure. We will be in touch. We will circle back with you via email, and once the show has gone through its editing process, we will let you know when it drops. We typically drop an episode on the 1st and the 15th of each month. We have several
Okay.
episodes coming out, so it'll be probably later in the summer.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Sounds
but we'll give
good.
you a sneak peek before, of course. But you've been a blessing. Have fun with your mom. Have fun in Houston, uh, and keep smiling like you are right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Wani. See ya.
Bye bye.